Hi, today we'll be talking to Mark Collins, an adventure racer. How are you, Mark?
Good, Ben. Good to be with you.
Thanks. So, when you were a teenager, what did you think you were going to become?
Yeah, when I was a teenager, adventure racing didn't exist. So there was no thought of that. I was obsessed with the outdoors, but didn't think of it as a career possibility at all. So I really had no idea, and I was sadly very much influenced by what other people were doing, and everyone was talking. All my contemporaries were becoming engineers, and that sort of seemed to be the path that I was going to take.
Yeah. And how was your life or surroundings at your home influenced during your teenage life influenced the profession you've got into?
Well, I was very lucky. I had a great. I was at a great school with a really great master, and he introduced an outdoor pursuits program in the school. This
Yeah.
was in the Natal Woodlands at Treverton College, and they had this big program, and they used to take us up into the mountains at every chance. They taught us rock climbing, canoeing, even skydiving. We did those sort of sports while I was still at school, and that had a massive influence in opening up a whole world for me.
Yeah.
Really opened up outdoors as an adventure.
So I'm going to change the topic more towards the mindset of that is needs to be built during the adventure racing. And I wrote personally, and this question almost relates to me very much, and I'm interested in it, is during an intense race, how do you convince yourself to keep pushing?
Yes, so rowing is something that fascinates me because but I've never rowed. But rowing, you're doing the same thing the whole time
Yeah.
at different intensities during a race. So I'm fascinated by that. Whereas adventure racing, you're very seldom doing the same thing. The big thing is the mentality of a race, and to try and get your head around it. When you start out a race, and you're probably going to be out there for 4 or 5 days racing virtually
Yeah.
non-stop. It's quite a big thing to get your head around, and it can be overwhelming at the start of a race. You sit there and you listen to the race briefing, and you actually get overwhelmed, and you've got to be very careful at that stage. You don't build this thing up in your mind to be bigger than what it is, and you tackle it like you tackle every single thing in life. You tackle it step by step, minute by minute, and the time just slowly passes, and you just keep focusing on what you can do, playing the cards in front of you to the best of your ability, and that's basically how you get through a race. And I've learned that the hard way, and it's so easy to get trapped into that, building this thing up to this big dark terrifying cloud in front of you, whereas you actually break it down, it is manageable and very manageable
And
if
have you
you
ever
take
been in a race and thought, flip, this is almost near to impossible?
all the time. I was at the briefing for the last big race I did, and the first leg of the race was 160 kilometers with about 16,000 meters of elevation gain, leg one of a 16-leg race.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like how are we ever going to get through that?
Uh,
And you do build it up in your mind, so all the time. And I think that's part of it. That's part of the attraction. One thing about us as human beings is we're hardwired. We get fulfillment from doing hard things. That's where fulfillment comes from, and you always think it's the success or the achievement. It's not actually that, and unfortunately it's not that. It's the actual pursuing of that, and that's why these sports like this exist. That's why you do hard things like rowing.
yeah.
you know
And during your races, is there one challenging moment that you've faced during your career that you remember?
Well, I could remember, many in different circumstances. I think the worst thing that happens, and happens to everyone, is when you're the weakest in the team. And during a race, or during a career of racing, sometimes you'll be the strongest, sometimes you'll be going along average, and other times you'll be weak. And it's worst when, I think, to actually be able to accept that, when you get ill on a race, for example, you might get an illness, diarrhea or flu or whatever. That is one of the hardest things to deal with, is confronting that and keeping going with that.
Yeah.
But I remember clearly one race in Australia, World Championship race. We had a caving section, and I'd got this completely wrong in my head, and so had my teammates. We had a complete misconception of what it was going to be. We actually had to visit 5 caves, and we were given a certain period which we were allowed to do it in. And they told us that the average team would take 3 hours, and us being one of the first teams to arrive, being a top team, We thought maybe it'd take us 2 hours, and then you could rest for the other 3 hours before you could continue with the rest of the race.
Yeah.
Now, we got this completely wrong, and we ended up we had completely had an idea of what the cave looked like. The caves were actually the size. The entrance was the size of a small rabbit hole, not even an average rabbit hole. And we eventually, after going past it many times, we came across the cave entrance, and we recognized that this must be. And my teammate, my brother, went down into the cave, and my other good teammate, incredibly racer, an incredibly powerful racer, an incredibly mentally strong racer, went in, but he suffers from claustrophobia, and he came out and he said, "I can't do this." And he said, "Look, I can't do this." And he said, I'm freaking out. I actually cannot do this. And I said, "We have to do this. Otherwise we have to visit the checkpoints in 5 of these caves. Otherwise we're going to be disqualified from the race, from the World Championship." So he knew at that point that he had to now get in. And just to give you an idea, the entrance of this cave was so tight that you had to take your helmet off just to get into the entrance. So we were faced with this situation in the middle of the night, in the middle of probably day 3 or night 3 of an adventure race, World Championship, and we had to deal with it. And he sat down, calmed himself down, and eventually just went through it. And I think what I learned from that, and I've learned previously, is people are going through many different things in a team. We all have strengths, weaknesses, things that terrify us, things that we can't deal with. And I think the job as leader or as teammates, is the leadership shown is to acknowledge that, to acknowledge that people, and once you've acknowledged that they're facing a significant challenge, it makes it a lot easier for them to deal with that.
Yeah,
I think that's one thing I took from that experience.
And these races are obviously pushing the limits of mental and physical endurance. What strategy do you use personally to stay motivated and focused during these races?
I think once I'm in a race, I don't struggle with staying motivated. I don't know whether it's stubborn or competitiveness, but I'm really motivated all the time. I think the challenge is to try keep everyone on the same page. It's very, when it's a team sport, you all have to finish together, and to try keep the rest of everyone at equal levels of motivation. That is a big challenge for a captain or for just a teammate. Because when you're suffering, when you're having, and you will go through a hard time on a 5-day race, there will be times when you're the strongest, and times when you're the weakest, and times when you're struggling, times when you're just struggling to stay awake. And at these times, it feels like the other guys in your team are just nailing it. They're just going. They're really putting the pressure on. And that's a big challenge. To try and keep everyone and try to communicate effectively that you all understand. Keep the goal in mind.
Yeah.
What we're trying to achieve. We knew this would be hard. This is it. We're in the hard spot now. We knew it would be hard. This is what we're trying to achieve. I think that's the big thing. But I never struggled with motivation on a race. Probably the contrary.
And if you had a teammate who was struggling with motivation, or was struggling, or the weakest member during a race, what would you tell them?
Well, I would remind them of the goal and what we set out to achieve, and where we are. I think the other big thing is, often in races we make a decision, and you take a navigational decision, and you end up getting stuck in thick vegetation, or in a terrible valley that you just can't. You actually literally end up crawling on your hands and knees with your backpack snagging against roots and in thick jungle, and you just can't move. And at this time, you imagine that your competitors have found a path, and they're all flying along, and they're putting kilometers every minute into you. And this starts going through your head, and this is the worst thing. And you just struggle to get through it. And eventually you've made your decision, and you keep pushing through, and you come out of the jungle, and you find out that actually everyone was stuck in the jungle.
Yeah.
Everyone was going through that sort of thing. So I think, and that happened to me often. And I think that's the same in life. When you're going through a tough time, whatever it is in business, financially, relationships, whatever it is, physically training, you're going through your low periods, you imagine everyone else is flying. You only, and especially in this day and age of social media, you only get to see people when they're flying.
Yeah.
But you tend to forget that everybody struggles. So I think in a race, when people go through the dark patches, you say, well, this is what it's about. It's about racing. This is why we come here, to challenge ourselves to our limits. And now we're at our limits. And now it's about dealing with that. And I think, that's how I motivate it. the other thing that I find very successfully in motivating other people is humor, and this is very much underrated. I think some of the great explorers, some of the guys I looked up to, they used humor very effectively. Guys like Shackleton, and they would make jokes about their situation, how dire it was, and how much you're suffering. And I think humor can take the edge off a lot of things dramatically, and that's and laughing at yourself and laughing at your situation. I think learning to be able to do that is a great way of coping with the difficult times.
Absolutely. And it's obviously also important to build a team, which is a world-class team, to try and motivate yourself and use these tactics of humor effectively. Could you tell us a bit about the qualities you look for when selecting your team members?
So adventure racing, you need people to be good at the sort of three base things. You need them to be good on foot, and good on really off-road technical terrain. You need them to be good cyclists and basically good paddlers. They don't need to be world-class in any of them, but they need to be pretty proficient in all three of them. And the world-class comes in the average of what you can work off, that base that you can work off. You then need an ability to stay awake. I've raced with really strong people who just can't stay awake after 24 hours they're needing to sleep, and they just you need that sort of thing. And then the ability to communicate. It's a team sport, to get on with other people, to be completely honest with each other. So a big key in adventure racing is being able to share your weight. It's very effective when you're going along. If you're carrying a couple of kilograms more than me, and we're at the same strength, you'll be going slower. You'll be suffering more. You'll be spending more energy. Yeah. And you've got to move that little bit of weight around the team. And in order to do that, you need a bit of, you've got to not be looking after yourself the whole time. You've got to be a person that can look after other people. And that's essential. A lot of athletes are only good at looking after themselves. And, it's pointless having a really strong athlete in a team who's strong all the time, but doesn't help the rest of the team.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to help the rest. It's a team sport. It doesn't matter how strong you are. If you can't get the slowest person to go faster, you're going to be going at their pace.
100%.
And I look at that sort of selflessness in the athlete, the ability to be completely honest about it, because you also can't blow yourself up and go work yourself into a hole. I've seen guys and girls do that a lot, by doing too much for the team. So to be able to have that sort of humility that you can put your egos in the team basket, that's a big thing. Obviously a team needs two navigators and raw desire. I think if you want to be a competitive team, probably raw desire is the biggest thing that you need.
You mentioned that some people may overwork themselves in this team environment. How are you able to set ambitious yet attainable goals for yourself and your team?
I think part of, you look at what you've achieved and what you achieved in the past and how you could build on that. And once having tasted what it was like to race against the world's best teams, my dream was, I was racing then for a Spanish team. My dream was always to have a South African team that could race at that level. And I came back knowing, I tasted that. So I knew what we could do, and I knew we could have a team that could perform with them. Getting the rest of the guys to believe that was a challenge. We ended up racing against guys that we'd only ever seen on TV before. Our heroes. We ended up racing with them. Getting them to believe that we belonged there, it was a challenge. And we spoke about it. I in my team, I'm a great believer in visualization. I believe in being able to visualize yourself into a situation, be able to, put yourself in a situation before you actually get there, so that it's not such a surprise. And I'm not talking about visualizing things as being easy. You must accept and be able to put yourself in a situation that's going to be hard, but you visualize yourself coping and dealing with it. So that was one of the great ways I used to use to get the team on the same page, get everyone, calm them all down, and start visualizing the race from day one through what it was going to be like, what we aimed to achieve, and how we were going to deal with the challenges.
And has there ever been a time where you've come across an unexpected situation that you've had to deal with?
I think adventure racing, is about coming across a lot of unexpected situations. You often, you have a map, you're working off a map. So you build a picture off that map of what the terrain's going to look like, and you come across it and it doesn't quite look like look like you envisaged it. Very difficult to tell how thick the vegetation is going to be from a map, often, or how steep the surrounds are going to be. So you're often coming across, situations, and that caving was a very, very good example of a thing that we had built this mental picture in our mind of something that was completely different to what it was in the reality. So yes, often coming across situations like that, coming across rivers that have a lot more water in or a lot less water than you expected, and you have to change your strategy completely. I mean, you end up dragging a canoe down a dry river for 50 kilometers that you thought you were going to paddle down. And it ends up being a trekking leg, not a paddling leg. You thought you were going to rest your legs. So then you have to, at some stage, make allowance for that in the rest of the race.
Yep. And I can only imagine communication is almost vital for these unexpected situations to try to get through them. Are there any fundamentals that you need to put in place when you're communicating with your team?
I think a lot of communication is more what you do. It's not about what you say, and how you show people that you care. I think particularly, and I had to learn a lot of lessons about communication. And like I said, one of the ones is acknowledging people who are having a challenge. I think just that acknowledgement takes a great weight off their shoulders. Little things like that. I think creating, and this happens over a long time in a team, you need to be able to create a space where you can communicate honestly. And I think, over trust, a lot of the team guys and girls that I raced with, I knew what their strengths were. So when they were having a tough time, it wasn't because they were weak. It was because they were having a tough time. And they could tell you that. And the same with me, and I also, and I had to live up to that. When I had to, when I was struggling, I had to ask for help. And I had to do this. It's a big thing, when you think you're a strong racer and you need to ask someone to help carry your backpack for you. And I think by setting that example, that also enables other people to communicate honestly and effectively. And the good teams do that. They are able to move a lot quicker because they do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And in your experience, what role does self-belief play in achieving such extraordinary results?
I think self-belief is absolutely the foundation to everything. And I think you've got to work on it. You spend a lot of time dreaming about something, but if you can dream it, you can achieve it. And a lot of time you spend a lot of the time telling well, that's unrealistic. That's one word I think a young person should take out of their vocabulary completely, is the word unrealistic. When somebody says to you that's unrealistic, or be realistic, I don't think there's anything such thing as being realistic. If I had, when I first set my ambitions to race against the world's best teams, I spent 90% of the time not being able to believe that I could compete with these guys. And then, during my runs, during my high moments, during my visualizations, I would visualize myself till eventually I became accepting of that, until eventually I became the person that could do that. But I remember many times people saying it's not realistic. It's not realistic. You'll get into that race, or So I think.
And how can someone that doesn't have that self-belief develop it, in your opinion?
Look, I think a young person, probably the best thing you can do is invest in the way you think. It's not what you learn, it's the way you think, the way you use your mind, the way you talk to yourself, and create those habits. The human mind is, if you start talking negatively, or thinking negative thoughts, or accepting negative thoughts, that's going to be your reality. I think so. To create a positive mindset is something that takes a lot of work, and you have to shield yourself and exclude the negativity, and reinforce your positive beliefs. I think you have to celebrate your successes, and I really mean celebrate them, and celebrate your little wins and your gains, your minor gains that you make every day, and eventually those little habits will create a positive mindset, and that will help your self-belief.
And are there any lessons that you've learned during your racing career that can be used in society?
I think one thing that adventure racing has taken us all over the world. I've been lucky to go and race in in every continent except Antarctica, and it's shown me how similar people are at our core, and how I think that the big thing is how generally how good people are, you know. And I think it's very important in a society where we tend to be bombarded with news that is overwhelmingly negative, because overwhelmingly negative news is more interesting to read than the boring stuff about people being good. But in all over the world, I've knocked on people's doors at 2 a.m. and been made food and coffee and offered to sleep on their floor, even in the people who have the poorest environments, right through to people who are living first world lives in Canada, from people who are really poor in some of the Asian countries or other places, being offered that hospitality. I think remembering that people are good and welcoming and caring. It's a caring world, actually.
Yep. And are there any messages that you hope young people will take away from your experiences in adventure racing?
I think if I look back, I would do things. I would be far more energetic about the things that I was enthusiastic about. I would like to have spent far more time pursuing, not worrying about what I thought I had to do with my life, or what I thought was responsible to do with my life, to do with what I wanted and what interested me. Obviously, I can't be too harsh on myself, because the sport of adventure racing didn't exist when I was your age. In fact, it took about 10 years older than you before I even heard about adventure racing. But to have spent more time climbing, pursuing adventure activities. And I would say to young people, if you can learn anything, my greatest successes have come from, in fact, my only successes have come from the things that I've been really enthusiastic about.
Yeah. And is there one memory or encounter or experience with wildlife during one of your races that left a lasting impression?
Look, in the races I've come across, the closest calls I've had with wild animals in races have been snakes, both in Vietnam, in Australia, and in South Africa. I came across some really poisonous snakes in very close encounters with them. I came across a mamba, literally face to face, within a meter of the biggest black mamba I've seen to date. In the early hours of the morning in Swaziland. In Vietnam, it was a cobra, and in Australia, I think it was called a king brown, or a big brown snake. It's the equivalent of the black mamba. And there, I actually put my hand on a ledge, and the snake was on it. I actually touched the snake, and it didn't bite me. But in my training and in my wanderings, I've come across all manner. I've stood on a crocodile, walked into leopards and lions and elephants and everything. Very lucky to have had access to those places and to have been born and live in a country that I do live in.
So I'm going to change the topic more towards personal relationships and your personal life. How are you able to balance these races with other aspects of life?
Look, that's been the big challenge. And I think for me personally, the challenge has been more in my head than actually reality. I think, I'm very lucky that my wife has supported me so extensively in adventure racing. She gets really enthusiastic about it, and my daughters are absolutely enthralled by it. But there was a time where I suffered a lot from guilt. I felt a lot, because training for these big races would take me out for long times, and I had this overwhelming feeling of guilt for a lot of the time, and most of that was like most things, and things like I said earlier, that you build up in your mind that are actually bigger than they are.
Yeah.
And most of them can be talked through. I think, where we interact with other people and people depend on us and people we co-inhabit with and live with and care about us, we do need to communicate effectively about what we want and why we're doing what we are. I think you got to make the effort to do that. But I don't think you got to be ruled by something that doesn't exist. Like in my case, the big guilt, which had a very, very big effect on me.
And looking back on your 20-year career, what is one piece of advice you would give to your younger self when you were just starting out in adventure racing?
I would say train longer at lower intensities. that would be the big thing. Train more and go vigorously. Take the opportunities to race, and keep in shape so that when these opportunities come around, you can make the most of them.
And is there one low point in, that you remember in your career, and how are you able to get from there to where you are now?
I think, probably the biggest low point, we became obsessed with, before adventure racing really started, there was a thing called the Camel Trophy, and they needed you to apply in writing for this thing, and I got rejected, and the applications came about once a year. And I remember, getting that rejection letter basically saying, you haven't got what we're looking for. I remember it was a low time for me, a whole year before I could. This was the one thing that I really, for once in my life, I really wanted this. I really wanted something, and I didn't even get in the door. I didn't even, qualify to the top 800 guys that they were looking for. So it was quite difficult to motivate. But I actually used that rejection to fuel me. I was determined to show them wrong, and I did. And next year we made it through out of the 5,000 applicants to get selected. So that was a big lesson, from a low point to a high point, and it made it a lot sweeter, I think, when it finally did come around.
So a constant question I always ask at the end of every interview is, what is your personal definition of success?
I think my personal definition of success is if you have engaged the human experience to your maximum risk, your maximum effort in what you're interested in. There's so much on offer. You might, as a human, artistically, creatively, athletically, in business, in all sorts of things. If you've embraced everything, and the one thing that didn't stop you was being a coward, being too scared to put yourself out. Sometimes circumstances might prevent you from doing things and things like that, but as long as that's not you, as long as it's not your fear that has stopped you, I think that's success. If you've taken on everything that you're interested in taking on to its maximum ability, without giving in to fear. That's success.
And what is the next step in your journey to continue achieving success?
Well, I think, for me now it's changed. The options of athletic success are no longer there. Sort of a career in adventure racing, unfortunately, is a lot longer than most other sporting careers, but the windows do close, and it's sort of, I think the challenge is now to find things that stimulate me as much and are rewarding. And I'm actually finding a lot of rewarding in climbing at the moment. That's one of my big adjustments. I think it challenges me mentally, and in terms of mindset, in terms of the way you think, and I really love that. That's the big thing, and to try and get balance between that and staying alive.
Yep. And then to end us off, if you go back and say one thing to your 16-year-old self, what would that be?
One thing or one word? I've thought about this a lot. If it was one word, it would be climb.
Climb. And if it was one piece of advice?
One piece of advice, I would say, that what you dream about is possible, and go for it.
Amazing. Cool. Well, thank you so much. And I really do appreciate this.
Thank you, Ben.
Cool.
Good to chat to you.